welcome everyone to the March meeting of the Finance Committee.
Yeah,
Cheryl,
she interviewed me there.
Chair will entertain a motion.
Yeah.
Evelyn on the motion, Bill on the second to approve the minutes. Committee, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All opposed? Carried. We'll move right to the action item, request from the Treasurer's Office. Mr. Swan will discuss a request for a loan to Westmount Health Facility for cash flow to pay a bill from New York State Retirement. Yeah, let's back up one. I apologize. 3-1, Joan just pointed out the request for transfer of funds attached for committee approval. Bill on the motion, Evelyn on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Swan.
Presently, Westmount, good morning, everyone. Presently, Westmount has on hand in cash plus or minus $500,000. We just received a $600,000 bill from the New York State Retirement System, plus they need probably an additional $500,000 to get them through the May-June period of time. So we're requesting that a resolution be done to loan them gotta remember what I put down, $1.4 million to get them through. Now this is obviously, the payback would come when the IGT funds come in, because that's what's creating the cash flow shortage.
How long will we
Could be next week, it could be 2 years. I can't answer that question. I mean, last year we got 2 years worth of payments in 1 year. So, I mean, I have no idea, when this is going to be coming through. But
Mr. Dickinson?
Did you shower this morning?
What's that?
Did you shower this morning?
I did. Why? Why?
Everybody's just waiting.
I'd like to move that, please.
Moved by Mr. Dickinson, second. Edna Frazier.
Mike, you're asking this just through the end of May, June timeframe?
This amount of money should get Westmount through probably the end of June if we need to go that far.
Okay, because as you know, we budgeted through the end of May.
Right.
And everything kind of works out assuming the place is sold on time.
Right.
But if it isn't, there is going to be a loss later this year. I want to make sure the committee knows that, right?
Yeah. I mean, they don't necessarily need all of this money, and it will be dispensed as needed, and we may not have to use the total amount, but I'd rather be a little high on it so I don't have to come back next month.
Mr. Dickinson?
Paul, if it doesn't close until the end of June, what kind of monies are we talking?
Well, we've calculated it out on average of $165,000 a month that is costing the county every month that we go past that date. The practicality of it is, though, it'll depend on the exact cash flow needs, because some months you may need 300, some months you may need 100, but the bottom line is it will cost, Mike, I think that, was it $1 million more for the year?
Yes.
If it's kept open for the year. So everything is kind of tied into trying to make this work out as smoothly as we can.
Any other questions for the Treasurer? There being none, we're ready for the question. All those in favor of the resolution as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is carried. Action item 3, referral from the County Facilities Committee, Airport. Request to authorize an appropriation from the Airport Reserve Account A892 to Budget Code A9950-910, transfer capital projects in the amount of $38,000. These funds will be used to increase capital project number H306.9550280, land navigation easement Forest Enterprises, as outlined in Agenda Item B. Chair will entertain a motion regarding Item 3A. Mr. Dickinson, second. Mr. Monroe, any questions?
What exactly is this for?
Jeff?
This is an airport maintenance building. It also houses the main electrical services coming in to feed the entire airport.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? There being none, all those in favor Item 3A, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 3A is carried. Item 3B, request to increase capital project number H306.9550280, land navigation easement, Forest Enterprises, in the amount of $38,000, with the source of funding to be transferred from the budget code A9950-910, transfer capital projects. I believe this is related to the item we just approved, although, can we have a motion on 3B? Fred, Dennis, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
If I could, I apologize. I just misspoke on that last item. It wasn't regarding the airport maintenance facility, for the new, there's another project ongoing with, roof work for that, and I misread quickly, and that's not what this is about. This is for, this is for the land acquisition easement for the Forest Enterprises parcel. We had authorized some additional work, for some consultant and some appraisal work that had been done. We had never moved the money into the project. That resolution went, forward, I think, in 2013. Now the work has advanced and is ready to close very shortly, but we need to apply the additional $38,000 into the project. I apologize for that.
Thank you. Item 4, referral from the Criminal Justice Committee, Public Defender. Request to amend the 2015 county budget to reflect the receipt of unanticipated revenues and appropriations in the amount of $44,205 in relation to funding provided by the Office of Indigent Legal Services. Chair will entertain a motion regarding item 4. Mr. Dickinson, Ms. Wood, any discussion? There being none, we're ready for the question. All those in favor of item 4 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 4 is carried. Item 5, referral from the Economic Growth and Development Committee, Planning and Community Development, request to amend the 2015 county budget in the amount of $28,203 to appropriate funds and increase GIS staffing hours to fulfill grant awards. Chair will entertain a motion regarding item 5. Mr. Dickinson, Mr. Taylor, any discussion? There being none, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of item 5 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 5 is carried. Item 6, referral from the Health Services Committee, Office of Community Services. 6A, request to amend the 2015 county budget to reflect the receipt of unanticipated revenues and appropriations in the amount of $14,400 in relation to funding received from the New York State Office of Mental Health. These are pass-through funds for the Warren Washington Association of Mental Health, which are meant to cover the 2% direct care cost of living adjustment for nonprofit agencies. We have a motion to move items A through item F. Do we have a second to that? Mr. Dickinson, thank you. Any discussion regarding the motion? There being none, all those in favor of approving the motion 6A through F signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 7, referral from the Public Safety Committee, Office of Emergency Services, request to establish capital project number H358.9550280, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program in the amount of $150,000 to update the Warren County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan. Chair will entertain a motion regarding item 7. Mr. Sokol, Ms. Wood, thank you on the second. Any discussion?
What exactly is this? Who's preparing this one?
Soil, we're actually working with Soil and Water on
Oh,
our
Soil and Water?
emergency services.
We're doing
office
it
are
jointly.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? There being none, all those in favor of item 7 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 7 is carried. Item 8, referral from the Public Works Committee, DPW, request to amend the county budget in the amount of $7,740 to appropriate funding in the correct budget codes for the time one Building and Grounds employee spends working on the fuel farm sites. Chair will entertain a motion regarding item 8A. Mr. Merlino, Mr. Kenny on the second. Any questions? There being none, all those in favor of item 8A as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 8A is carried. Item 8B, Parks, Recreation, and Railroad, request to amend the 2015 county budget to reflect the receipt of unanticipated revenues and expenditures in the amount of $5,935 for grant funding received from the Glens Falls Foundation for the creation of a handicap-accessible community sensory garden at Up Yonder Farm. Chair will entertain a motion regarding 8B. Ms. Wood, was that Mr. Sokol on the second? Any questions? There being none, all those in favor of item 8B as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 8B is carried. Item 9, referral from the Real Property Tax Services Committee, request to approve the Phase 2 preliminary assessments with Clark Patterson Lee for 3 parcels, Town of Hague tax map parcel number 25.31-1-8, Town of Johnsburg tax map parcel 133.85-1-27, and Town of Queensbury tax map parcel number 302.8-1-2, as well as to request an appropriation in the amount of $30,000 from the Environmental Testing Reserve Fund A893.00 to budget code A.1355-470, Real Property Tax Service Agency contract to fund the assessment work. Chair will entertain a motion to bring item 9 to the floor. Mr. Monroe, Mr. Dickinson on the second. Any discussion, perhaps, Mike, you could just quickly?
Answer any of your questions on this if you want, but basically these are 3 parcels that the county has not taken title to, but we have taken an incident of title. In other words, we have the ability to go on the properties to inspect them because we suspect that they might be contaminated. Phase 1 was completed by Clark Patterson Lee, and all the Phase 1 said that we basically need to do Phase 2. So what we did was we've gotten Phase 2 broken into 2 pieces, basically in an A and a B section, and this is to fund the A section, which will be a little more on-site work. They'll be doing, Jeff might be able to answer exactly what they're going to be doing, but this will be the 3 parcels that we've been holding for quite a while to foreclose on. The money is coming from the Environmental Testing Fund. I still have probably about $100,000 balance in that fund. That money comes from the proceeds of the tax auction, so it's not coming out of the general fund or anything.
Mr. Monroe.
I support this. This came through the Real Property Tax Committee, and, you know, for many years, I think over 20 that I can think of, we've not sold parcels that we think may be contaminated, and they just sat there and in effect off the tax rolls, and so that then this program was created. I think Mike suggested it, to create a fund to do the environmental testing, so it's a way to ultimately get properties back on the tax roll.
This is the next step in determining what we have with these properties. I mean, and this will determine where the next step should go, how bad it might be, and so forth. The ultimate goal, obviously, is to see if we can find out what is actually on these properties, if there is a problem, and try to get it cleaned up and get them back on the tax roll. That's the goal.
All righty, any other questions for the treasurer? There being none, we're ready for the question. All those in favor of item 9 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 9 is carried. Item 10, referral from the Support Services Committee, Information Technology, request to determine a source of funding for the purchase of a DVR machine and 4 cameras to be installed in the boardroom to enable video recording of board meetings at an approximate cost of $500. Chair will entertain a motion regarding item 10. Bring it to the floor.
Bring it to the floor and designate a source of funding as potentially a contingency fund?
We have a motion to bring this to the floor for approval, second by Mr. Taylor. To approve this at a cost of $500 in the source of funding to be the contingency fund. Any questions or discussion regarding this item, Mr. Taylor?
The question doesn't regard this item, but it's a good time to ask it anyway. The meeting next Monday, I assume is going to be held in the regular boardroom.
Yes.
Is there any way at all that we can get that recorded and get it out to the public?
I can talk to Mike Colvin, IT. I'll give him a call right after this meeting.
Any other questions? Mr. Dickinson?
I'd like the camera moved from the back of the room. That's not my best side.
Mr. Kenny's remark?
There's enough of that.
Alrighty. All those in favor of item 10 as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 10 is carried. Item 11, referral from the Tourism Committee, request to appropriate funds in the amount of $6,510 from the Occupancy Tax Reserve A.881.00 to Budget Code A.6417470 Tourism Occupancy Contract to fund the county's 62% share of the cost of a conceptual planning study performed by Elan Design and Landscape Architects, PLLC, relative to the construction of a performance stage on the festival space. And was that tourism or was that? All right, Mr. Merlino brought to our attention this morning that that was a referral from the Occupancy Tax Committee, if you could so note. We have a motion regarding the proposal. Mr. Merlino, Mr. Kenny on the second. Any further discussion?
I would just like, comment that, you know, two things that are definitely lacking at the festival space now. One is the fence, which we've got that under control and we're moving forward with it. And the second is a stage, which, you know, many of the, events want a stage, so I'm glad to see that moving forward.
Are we ready for the question? All those in favor of item 11 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 11 is carried. Item 12, a request, before we get to item 12, we have an addendum that you should all have in the back of your packet. It's an action item 11, a referral from the Public Works Committee, DPW, request to establish capital project number H357.9550280 Charles R. Wood Park Festival Space Perimeter Fence in the amount of $250,000 with the source of funding to be a serial bond as approved by resolution number 82 of 2015. Chair will entertain a motion to bring this to the floor. Mr. Dickinson, Mr. Merlino on the second. Any discussion? We've discussed this in various committees. Everyone's aware of it. Very good. Are we ready for the question? All those in favor of item 11 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 11 is carried. We also have, I'll turn the floor over to Ms. Wood. I think, Evelyn, you have something you want to put
I do.
forward.
We talked in economic growth, and I thought you were there to be the chair first. Wayne had mentioned there's a grant that Warren County received, and I think it was in 2012, that Thurman and Bolton were both benefits from. We did some bridge replacement. Wayne had recommended that we get some form of reimbursement. The towns have done the work. We're still waiting on the state, MWBE being what it is. It's a long and involved process. So Wayne had recommended that we reimburse the towns at some portion, and since then I've talked to the treasurer, and I think, Ron, you have as well, and we had decided that if it was agreeable with the committee, that we request half reimbursement. We don't want to go for the full reimbursement of what the town spent, because we're not certain where the MWBE is going to lie in the end, and we don't want to get in a bookkeeping nightmare, so to speak. So we'd like to ask the committee's consideration that the towns be reimbursed half of what they paid for through the county grant.
I'll ask Martin. Martin, if you could just weigh in on the proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it seems to me that we've done these kind of advancements before. I mean, the most recent example is the boat wash stations, where we've advanced a significant amount in anticipation of receipt of funds through a grant program. So there's certainly precedent for this type of activity if that's what the committee has. Pleasure of the committee. It seems to me there's nothing wrong with doing this from my perspective.
Any, Mr. Dickinson?
I'm not quite sure why we do that for Bolton, but I can certainly see why we'd like to help out. But since you're riding on his curtail, I'll make a motion to do exactly that.
And I'll second it for the smaller town.
We have a motion and a second from Mr. Merlino, and Mr. Dickinson, your poor cousins to the north do appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm right back here.
That's what Sim must be talking about, isn't it?
Mr. Swan?
Can we put a dollar amount in that?
Why don't we say, $125,000 for Thurman. That won't quite be half probably, but it'll be close enough. And I believe Bolton was supposed to get around 60,000 if I remember correctly.
That's fine.
Okay.
That would be, what, 30?
30? Okay. Just so we know,
Mhm.
we've got a dollar figure to cut the check for.
Fine. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank
Motion,
you.
motion is carried. You're most welcome. Request items to be discussed by the county administrator. Paul, why don't I turn item 12 over to you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I can go through these relatively quickly. A is the journal reports that are required to be submitted by the committee. You'll recall that my office was assigned the responsibility of the transfers between codes. Probably the only one that may come to your attention that's a flag for you is that there's probably about $6,500 or so in OES for transfers, and you may wonder why they're doing so much. And it was a mistake in the budgeting process. They budgeted under telephone where they should have budgeted under data processing for iPads and other things. So the other ones are pretty small and routine. None of them really surprised me except for that one. The next item is, actually the next two items, B and C, are withdrawals from reserve funds. B is a withdrawal from the information technology fund for computers, and C is for an automobile. These are part of our planned purchases of equipment and vehicles, so I would recommend both of those to the committee, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a motion, items 12B and 12C? Ms. Wood, Mr. Merlino on the second. Any discussion, any questions? There being none, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of approving items 12B and 12C signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
The next item is D. This is a little unusual. We have as you know, we've standardized all of our copiers and printers throughout the county through National Business Equipment back in 2012, and as it notes here, it was amended in 2013. At the time we did this, we had a all-in-one printer, copier, et cetera, down in DPW that we felt it had a lot of life in it, and we didn't want to really replace it at that time, so we made an exception and didn't replace it. Well, it died. And so now we need to replace it, and we're recommending that we do it through the lease agreement because even though it's going to be a short term, the lease agreement was for a 5-year period, we're looking at a renewal where we'll continue to enjoy more savings. So we're suggesting that get thrown underneath the lease agreement at this point.
Alrighty, so the, and the source of funding would be?
On that one, I would recommend that we just leave, for now, we can just leave it coming out of the account it is in, and then as we go through the year, we'll see if we're don't have sufficient funds to cover that copier.
Ready? Chair will entertain a motion regarding item D. Mr. Dickinson?
I'll make the motion, and I have a question.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Dickinson, second by Ms. Frazier, thank you. Mr. Dickinson?
Is this a large format printer?
No, this is a small one. It's actually from one of my highway crew shops. And it's the only machine they have. It is a small one just for foremen and crews.
Just so there's no misunderstanding, that $9,000, not the price of, that's the total lease amount. The actual additional lease payment for this is $35.20 a month. The machine itself runs $943 with additional 1G memory. So I could see where, you might ask that question.
Copier they were getting it. 3D copier. Thank you,
Alrighty.
Paul.
Any other questions? There being none, we're ready for the question. All those in favor of item D as presented signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Item D is carried.
The last item, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, concerns the property Warren County owns on Route 9, which is right adjacent to the Great Escape. This is a piece of property that many years ago we had a curb cut put in when the road to the Great Escape was being built. I think that was a good move because it left the property open for development. A few years back, we also tried to sell the property. We did not get what we were looking for in the property, so the board removed that from sale at that point. In evaluating a couple of things. One is I'm asking to come back to you to put this property back on the market, but I'm recommending we do certain things first to enhance the saleability of the property. The reason, though, before I get to that, the reason I'm recommending this is that we're going to have, if we do the court expansion, and depending upon exactly where the county's finances all turn out here, but even if everything goes well with Westmount and we do the court expansion, we will need some cash flow and some funds to cover our expenses next year and the year after. My thought is, and then if you look at our total financial picture, we have certain expenses, certain bonds and things that get paid off over time, but that takes a while before that cost gets lower. We're also expecting to see some other budget items drop over time, but my concern is over the next 2 years, 2016 and 2017, I'm very concerned that we won't have enough money to pay all the obligations that we want to pay unless we do some things now. And one of those items that I came up with that I thought about is I said, well, if we could sell this property, normally you don't want to use property sales for a one-time shot, and I do understand that. But what I feel that this is a one-time shot, it'll get us over the financial hurdle, we can use these funds, and then with the other items that are decreasing over time, it'll bridge the gap that we need to bridge in order for the county to stay very stable in its surplus balance as well as revenues. So my thought is that what I'd like to do is accomplish a couple things. Rather than just throw the property out onto sale then and get the money, my thought is we would be better off if we did a couple of things. That we did a survey of the property, because it'll have to be surveyed anyway sooner or later. That we also do a Phase 1 environmental audit, and that we do title abstract work and some preliminary work, at least with the town of Queensbury, in terms of what can be done on the site. My recommendation is that we do all of this work and then put it out to sale with a lot more information as to what this property can be used for, the fact that it's already been surveyed, the fact that it's already had an environmental audit done. I think we're going to do better selling it. The other thing is my recommendation is not only just to put it out to bid, but to look at and try to get it to the attention of developers that will turn this into a sales tax producing property and job producing property. So what we don't want to do, if we can avoid it, is just simply turn it over to somebody who's going to sit on it. We really want to do something that people are going to actually take action and do something with the property that'll benefit us in more than just the actual cash flow. So in order to do this, though, and to bring it to the attention of these types of folks that I think we want to get in front of, I'm recommending that we do this initial work. This initial work, I've gotten estimates, $2,800 for a survey, $2,000 for a Phase 1 environmental audit, roughly $3,500 in fees for title abstract, which is probably high, but there may be some work we need done in connection with town of Queensbury and getting through any subdivision process we need over there. So I'm looking at about $8,300, and I'm recommending that we take $9,000 out of the surplus fund and authorize it to go into various accounts to allow these things to happen. Some money would go to Jeff's account to allow a good size of the money would go to Jeff's account to allow for the survey and the environmental review. Part of the money would go into Martin's attorney's account to be able to do the other work that we need to do. I know it's an investment. I know this is a substantial sum of money, but I think that it'll put us in a position to be able to market this property better. When it comes time for marketing, we'll be discussing that with you further. I mean, I wouldn't just put it out after we get this done. I would be coming back to this committee and reviewing with you what our plans are. But part of my plans will, of course, be to work with Ed Bartholomew and to try to get this property, like I say, in front of the type of folks we want to do some serious development on this property, create jobs, additional sales tax.
Mr. Dickinson?
Again, I'd like to move that, and then I have a couple questions.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Taylor, thank you. Mr. Dickinson?
Where exactly is this property?
When you go out the front of the municipal center, and if you look right across the street, there's Gurney Lane, and if you look to your left, as if you're going towards the Great Escape, that huge parcel is right there on Route 9, and it's between Gurney Lane and the Great Escape.
Mr. Taylor?
I think it's a good plan, Paul, but would there be any reason that we should have an appraisal done prior to this process, or that would you want to wait until we get a buyer?
You know, I haven't thought about that, to be honest with you. I could see where you could. I mean, you don't have to under the bidding laws. I don't know if it'll make a difference in terms of what we ultimately receive bids for, but we certainly could do that. I think there has been some appraisals done in the past, though, now that I'm thinking back.
Mr. Atherton?
I think it's a great question. My only thought is that you may be putting appraiser in a better position to appraise the property if the work that Paul is suggesting is done is already done.
That's true, too.
Any other questions? Mike?
There wasn't two appraisals done, and I'm going by memory, so that could be a little sketchy, but it was in the $800 million range.
Yeah, that's my recollection. There was, some appraisals done. I don't remember the numbers, though.
I think they're only good for 6 months, too.
Any other questions? I think it's a prudent thing to do on our property regardless of whether we decide to sell or not sell on down the road. I think it's good to know your boundaries, and it's also good to know if you have any potential environmental issues associated with it. Regardless, even if you're going to utilize it yourself, you'd want to know where the boundaries were, and you'd want to know what kind of environmental issue. I think it's a prudent expenditure. Jim?
What's the zoning on it?
I believe it's highway commercial. I think that's, I thought I saw that in my notes someplace.
That's correct. There's a variety of uses that are available there under the Queensbury code. You know, typically looking at that, you would look at like a convenience store type arrangement. There are a number of uses that are available. I think also a subdivision is going to be required at some point though as well.
I stand corrected. The email I got indicates it's commercial intensive 1 acre.
You might wanna talk to John Stroud, cause I know he's looking to, like, I think he's 18, he wants to make things, you might wanna see what he envisions for Queensbury.
Certainly, we will,
To them.
that's, you know, an excellent suggestion, and we should do that.
Don't bring his wallet.
Alrighty. We're ready for the, we have a motion already, don't we? We have a motion on the floor. Ready for the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Mr. Afferdew.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I need to speak to the committee about continuing our special counsel, Larry Palchowitz, his services related to the Westmount transaction and all matters Westmount, for that matter. By Resolution 738 of 2013, the Board of Supervisors approved for a 15-month period, and that 15-month period expires in March of this year, right now, March of 2015, approved Larry and his firm, Bartlett, Pontiff, Stewart & Rhodes, PC, as special counsel to assist with the Westmount transaction, including the development of the negotiation and development of the contracts and the closing of the nursing home itself. It excluded certain matters. It excluded litigation and certain other matters. And then separately, we entered into, by separate resolution of 249 of 2014, we authorized Larry and his firm to examine the claims or causes of action that the county may have against the Siemens with respect to the cogeneration facility. So that is separate and apart. That item is ongoing, and we don't need to discuss that today as far as continuing that resolution. What I do need to talk to you about is continuing the services related to the Westmount transactions themselves. We negotiated and we agreed to pay Larry $4,000 a month for those particular services. So through March of this year, Larry would have billed for and we will have paid $60,000 to Larry and his firm for those services. I think it is wise and prudent to continue those services through the end of, at least have this through the end of our calendar year, December 31 of 2015. And I think there's a variety of reasons for doing so. I can tell you, and I think we can all agree, that Larry has been invaluable to the county in connection with these transactions and these matters. As you all know, I worked with Larry for 22 years at the Bartlett firm. I certainly had an appreciation during that time frame for his skill and for his ability in representing a variety of clients, including counties, including school districts, among many others. But I have to say, it wasn't until I became county attorney that I really became appreciative of his services when I became a client, in other words. And sometimes I feel, and I know this isn't the case, but sometimes I feel like we are Larry's only client. I certainly know that's not the case, but that's the kind of attention and detail that he gives to my office and gives to the county. And I will emphasize, I don't think we would be where we are with this transaction if it wasn't for Larry. I will plainly state that. And I think you all agree. What Larry has in mind and what we've discussed, and I think it's a good idea, is to continue the $4,000 arrangement per month through the end of this calendar year. But what Larry is willing to do is we do have the interest arbitration with the PBA coming up, and Larry is willing to include his services and his firm's services in that amount going forward through the end of the year. We will have that interest arbitration during this year. There's no question about it. So we're going to incorporate those interest arbitration services, and his firm will provide those services to us. Larry is also willing to be available for any and all other sort of labor negotiation, labor-related matters, excluding arbitrations, excluding litigation, but including such matters as healthcare rate negotiations and the like. I believe grievances would be included in the $4,000 per month. But I think it's important that I have to emphasize here, what is excluded and what needs to be excluded is actually the transaction, there's two real estate transactions, if you will. There's the asset purchase of the Westmount facility, the building itself transaction, but there's also a separate contract which Larry negotiated and has been approved and signed, which is the land sale contract. And we would like to emphasize that needs to be excluded from the $4,000 per month and would be billed at Larry's standard rates of $180 for the work that he's providing to the county, at $180 per hour for principal, $150 per hour for associate. As a matter of fact, to reemphasize that, I have a recent statement from Larry for those very services related to the real estate transaction, conveyance, closing, if you will, of the land that I need approval to pay of $2,205.83, which I received early this month. So, Mr. Chairman, what I'm asking for is for a resolution to continue the services of Bartlett, Pontiff, Stewart, and Rhodes at $4,000 per month, as I've outlined, through the end of this calendar year. It is my recommendation that we do so, that we exclude from the $4,000 per month the real estate transaction related to the land sale itself, the closing of that transaction, and all work related thereto, that we authorize payment to Mr. Paltrowitz in the amount of $180 per hour for principal's time, $150 per hour for associate's time, plus their reasonable anticipated expenses associated with that, and that we also authorize the payment of that invoice that I've received for those services to date in the amount of $2,205.83.
Why don't we have a motion to bring this to the floor for consideration? Mr. Dickinson, Mr. Taylor, do you have any questions for Martin regarding this? There being none, are we ready for the question then? All those in favor of the motion, of the resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is carried.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We have,
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. You didn't mention the asset sale in the motion.
That's included in the $4,000 per month.
Okay.
And I would be remiss, Mr. Chairman, and I do appreciate the vote, but I would be remiss, and each time I have to remind myself to do this, of my prior relationship with the Bartlett Pontiff firm and that I do receive ongoing payments on a monthly basis from them for deferred wages and also an LLC real estate company that I was a member of during my employment there.
So noted in the record. It's not on the agenda, but you recall at the board meeting, the last board meeting, we tabled an item regarding Rachel. Did you want to begin the discussion on the, I see Mr. Fitzgerald here.
Shared services.
Oh, it's going to be handled under shared services. All right, very good, thank you. Is any other business coming before the committee?
I'd like to point out that Jim Clark joined us today. He's my counterpart on the common council, the fifth ward representative.
Good morning. Welcome to the meeting, and I see a former colleague of ours once again sitting off of my left, Mr. Strainer. How are you? Welcome. There being no other business, Ms. Wood?
We have to approve the,
Oh, I'm sorry, you're
personnel committee, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but we don't wanna leave without doing that.
No, you're absolutely correct. Finance Committee action is required on the following items as approved by the Personnel Committee. Personnel agenda items 2B through D, 4 and 5. Chair will entertain a motion regarding item 14. Thank you, Ms. Wood. Mr. Merlino on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Any other business to come before the committee? There being none, motion to adjourn. Mr. Kenny, Mr. Dickinson on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Evelyn.
Told my